Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Global Fleet Summit APAC debate. A debate with three distinguished, acknowledged corporate fleet managers, with a fleet also in APAC, of course. Our guests today are Huub Smeets of Philip Morris, David Staples of pharmaceutical company Roche, and Timothy Tang of industrial company Bayer. And my co-moderator today is Yves Helven. He is our global fleet expert. Yves, perhaps we can start asking the panel members who they are and what kind of fleet do they have across APAC.
Yeah, very good idea. And we'll start with the first face on the screen, at least on my side, and that is Huub. So Huub, could you quickly please introduce us to your global and APAC fleet?
Yes, happy to do so, Yves. Huub Smeets, PMI. I'm based out of Madrid and responsible for global fleet. Asia Pacific for us is one of the main regions for fleet. We cover closely to 25,000 units globally, and half of them reside in Asia Pacific. Indonesia, Japan, Philippines, just to name a few, are among our top 5 countries globally. So that tells you already the interest of us in this specific region.
Super, thank you so much, Huub. And then we'll move to David. David, welcome this morning to the debate. Could you as well please explain us briefly, the size of your global fleet, size of your APAC fleet?
Certainly, thanks, Yves. So our global fleet in Roche is around 14,000 units. In the Asia Pacific region, that's quite a lot smaller. We have under 1,000 vehicles, passenger vehicles in the Asia Pacific region, and they are spread across around 16 countries in the Asia Pacific region. And so we have a goal to replicate some of the benefits that we've generated in other regions in our Asia Pacific region.
And finally, Timothy Tang from Bayer. Welcome, Timothy. Same question to you. Can you tell us your global fleet size and your fleet size in APAC, please?
Yeah, thank you. This is Timothy Tang, and coming from Bayer. And as everyone knows, it is a pharmaceutical companies, and we have a fleet footprint mainly in US. And also in EMEA region, we have Germany is the major fleet. We have major fleet users in Germany, and as well in the APAC region. We have Japan and India. They are our major fleet users in those countries. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how many vehicles do you have in APAC? Do you have an ID? Timothy?
Yeah, it's in APAC we have around 20,000. Yeah.
Okay, that's quite a large fleet. Okay, perfect. So we have 3 specialists in terms of vehicle fleet management in APAC, but of course we can imagine that they still have some challenges, some needs, some expectations. So this is also what we would like to discuss with them, as tomorrow we will have our panel discussion with the founding partners of this conference, Geotab, ALD, MUL, and Nissan, and so we can also listen to them in order to see how they will better serve their customers across the APAC region. First topic we would like to discuss is around strategy, and the question is for David Staples of Roche. David, can you briefly elaborate on the building blocks of your fleet strategy in APAC and where you are today with that strategy? Are you satisfied? Is there still quite some work that needs to be done? And where is it based on? What are the building blocks?
Sure. No, thanks, Stephen. So the building blocks of our strategy are really four main components. The first one is around vendor consolidation, particularly in the fleet manager space. We have a large number of suppliers across the region. It is quite a fragmented supply base for us in Asia Pacific. So the opportunity to consolidate down to fewer fleet managers is one of the key elements of our strategy to drive, obviously, financial benefits, leverage the experience and the governance of those suppliers. The second one is really around either whole or selective outsourcing. So we are a pharmaceutical health life sciences company. Fleet management is not our core business. So we would look to the market to provide that service for us in either a wholly or a partially outsourced operation. Contracting would be the third element that is quite important to us. It's having a very robust a contractual arrangement situation from maybe a regional level agreement, then in-country statements of work, if you like, or service agreements within a country, and obviously an individual lease agreement per vehicle, but to have a robust and, where we can, a consistent contracting structure in place to provide that governance. And the fourth, and possibly the most important element, is around analytics. An informed buyer is a powerful buyer, and the ability to have a very good real-time understanding of the size, nature, the status of our fleet is very important. So we want to drive the opportunity to build better analytics through good, consistent reporting, where we can understand volumes, we can understand all of the metrics that allow us to be the best informed around our fleet. Where are we at? We have a very well-defined strategy. We are in the middle of execution. So there are some parts that we are looking to execute sooner rather than later. And I may talk a little later around how that varies country to country, but we're now in execution phase, and I would hope that 2021 delivers us some good outcomes on our strategy to across those four key elements.
Okay, good. Yves, do you want to pick in with a follow-up question for someone?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the analytics, and obviously, David, you mentioned it yourself. David, APAC is it's not a region where it's easy to consolidate, and it's not that easy to get data of the same quality regularly and so on. And then I'm thinking about the challenges that Huub must have with a 12,000 car fleet. Huub, could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, certainly. And I can confirm the pillars David is mentioning are basically the same pillars we are working on. And yeah, analytics is only one of those challenges, I would say. A lot of the data is totally fragmented because in the region we are not yet consolidated, and yet might be taking much longer compared to, for instance, a region like Europe, where we can work with leading or international, I would say, leasing companies versus the difference in Asia Pacific, where you hardly have a presence of them. Also, some of these suppliers are operating, as they say, regionally, but if you really drill down, then it is really still on a local level, so that doesn't help with the analytics. So a lot of what we are doing is manual, where we get data from our countries. We at least do that twice a year, which is a huge exercise, as you can imagine. We are looking at elements like not only the brands and the units itself, but also mileage, CO2 emission, grade of the people, all of those elements we are taking into consideration in order to get better fueled for our strategy moving forward. Mm-hmm. Yeah, analytics is certainly a huge challenge there.
Yeah, and Huub, maybe jump to the second question, and I'm going to ask it as well to you. You talked about analytics, the difficulties of harmonizing, consolidating the vendor landscape, the challenges that you have of consolidating and gathering data. Now, if you would put yourself in the position of someone who starts off in Asia Pac as a brand new, fresh fleet manager with responsibility over the region, what would you think? What would you recommend to this person? You know, what would be the ultimate goal of their strategy, and what would be the quick wins that they could realize?
I think at the end of the day, it is very important. I'm European, and you work in a region which has a different culture, and that is something you totally need to recognize in developing your strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you know, we in Europe say, okay, you discuss something and you agree something, but hierarchy is also impacting the total development of your strategy in Asia Pacific. What is truly important to me is to work with local teams, to recognize those local teams, and don't act from corporate as you know everything, because you don't.
Mhm.
It's truly important for the success of your strategy to work with and the way we do it, basically we have a regional procurement structure based in Hong Kong, and they are basically the hub for me and for us as PMI to work with the country specifically. Having said that, we have, for instance, weekly calls with the regions, but then if necessary, we will also pick up the phone with the likes of Indonesia or Philippines, because it is so important. And, you know, it is also important to understand, for instance, an element like road conditions, floodings, mountains, those things in a country in Europe or US or in LATAM, totally different. So you need to recognize all those elements in order to be able to drive a successful strategy.
Okay.
So you're mentioning culture, you're mentioning country specifics.
Yes.
Would you say that these are really the first topics that a new fleet manager should focus on before focusing on the consolidation, on the data collection, and so on?
I would say yes, because that is really a crucial building block for your future. And it's obvious that you need to know what is happening in the market. But in order to do so, you will need the input from the local people.
Perhaps we can move on to Timothy Tang of Bayer. Timothy, what is the ultimate goal of the Bayer strategy in APAC, and how do you approach APAC? Is it as one region? Is it with sub-regions? Or is it country by country? What is your best practice?
Yeah. Thanks for asking the questions. I can kind of echo what Amberto has been described. It is important to have a general understanding of the local market. It is important, and also we need to understand the market environment and also different cultures, and those are crucial for Bayer strategy as well. And it is also important for us to define the approach. Geographically, we can divide APAC into several sub-regions like ANZ, South Asia, ASEAN, and North Asia, Greater China, etc. However, if we dive in and look into the market conditions, regulations, cultures in each and every countries, they are different actually. And in terms of the selection of the OEM, leasing company setup, maturity level of the fleet market, at the local level, they are all different. From Bayer perspective, what we can see is potentially ANZ has the most potential to take a sub-region approach, to take a regional approach for ANZ. It is possible because they are both countries are quite similar in terms of the market condition and everything. I think the rest of the countries we have to take a country by country approach when we're running the sourcing event. There are some of the challenges we're facing here. Firstly, like even though we are able to identify the global preferred supplier, but they are not able to, they don't have the footprint in many of the APAC countries. So this is one of the reasons. And also, even though we are able to define some of the strong regional players, but they are not providing a regional actually the solutions to us. And lastly, the countries within the same region, same sub-region, but they also have the totally different market setup. I just give you an example. In South Asia, we are covering countries like India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. That the full service leasing is only established in India market, whereas in Pakistan and Bangladesh, we need to find different solutions like finance lease. Yeah? So those are the challenges we're facing, and that's why we take the such approach at Bayer.
Okay. Another question for you, Timothy, is based also on your strategy. I would like to know in what way do you allow flexibility and even mandate and power to local countries, local fleet managers? Is it that you are building your strategy in APAC from the bottom up, or is it really that from a centralized level you have some guidelines that you are trying to apply across APAC with the different countries?
Yeah. So in general, for Bayer, we're taking a top-down approach. So at the global level, we define a global strategy, and they're mainly to have a single supplier or to have a preferred supplier at for each countries, and also we allow only leasing, yeah, as a method for fleet. Yeah, so those are the key element of the global strategy. Those are not negotiable. This is the basically this are the global strategy need to be implemented at the local level, and of course how we define the local supplier, the preferred supplier at the local level, there is some flexibility, but in general, those are the key global strategy element need to be implemented from the top to the bottom. Yeah.
Okay, Yves.
Yeah, I would like to go to David with the same question. David, you've got an interesting fleet in APAC, right? So 16 countries, roughly 1,000 cars, which basically means that you've got smaller fleets in a lot of countries. How do you organize yourself, and how do you organize the APAC fleet in terms of regions, sub-regions, or country levels? What level are you on when you look at APAC as a region?
Sure. So from a strategy perspective, we treat it as one region, and that strategy is very much connected to our global strategy. So from an APAC country's perspective, we would like to say, here is our starting point as the consistent strategy for the region. But because the region from our business perspective and the supply market is quite fragmented, I think it's not simply possible to do a one-size-fits-all. So therefore, we would like to maybe move to some sub-regional approaches, certainly Australia, New Zealand, maybe Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, grouping as well, maybe North Asia. So it's really a matter of just delivering the outcome that actually fits the local market. But back to Huub's point around really understanding what drives what drives the practice locally will then actually influence how we actually do our vendor consolidation and where we end up with in terms of one region or several sub-regions. We want to move away from the country by country approach, though. That's where we sit today, and it's not providing the benefits that we think we can enjoy. So as we move away from every country having its own arrangements, we won't mandate it, but what we will do is provide, I hope, a supply solution that is attractive for them to jump on board with. So it's a matter of, here is the table, please come and eat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stephen?
Yes. I think that we can continue with David also with a question around the supplier selection. Timothy already mentioned some elements about how at Bayer they work and would like to work, but he also mentioned, of course, that the international leasing company or the preferred global OEM is probably not always in every country where you are present with your solutions, services, and products. So how do you deal with supplier selection across APAC, and what can you recommend to those fleet managers that are just starting in dealing with suppliers in APAC?
So if I split that into two sections, from a vehicle manufacturer perspective, our approach is to absolutely make the best leverage of our 8 OEM global contracts that we have. Unfortunately, most vehicles types or brands are available in most countries. There are some pockets where there are some unique manufacturers per country. But no, absolutely. From a supplier selection perspective, our starting point is our 8 OEMs, and that's where we would like to have the vast majority of our fleet. From the fleet management perspective, and I include leasing in this, my belief is this is an emerging opportunity. Where, as Timothy said, the fleet management or leasing is not necessarily present in every country or in many countries. However, I think that the 3 organizations on this call and many others, the demand for that footprint extension across the region exists. So I believe that the opportunity exists for those fleet managers to then start to see where they can provide those services, how they can best deliver it as a direct organization or through some partnership or affiliation, but ultimately provide the benefit to us as customers and grow their business at the same time. By way of selection, we are doing some extremely strong due diligence in the region to make sure that we select someone that not only meets our needs of today, but also how that strategy, that joint strategy, will develop over time.
Timothy, you live in a country that has a very strong and well-defined strategy towards electrification. Besides that, we've also seen trends in Japan, right? Japanese government has announced a stop of combustion engine manufacturing by 2030, 2035. We see taxation change in Thailand towards more CO2 efficient vehicles. Now, the question here for you is, those trends, do you, as a company, as a fleet manager, do you pick up on them? Do you, is that an important item on your to-do list?
Yeah, thanks for the questions. Yeah, in Bayer, nowadays we always talk about the sustainability, environment-friendly topics. Yeah, I think it is in general it is a company's responsibility to balance the business growth and the go green. Yeah, we also have to support the greenification initiative. In Bayer, we also announced, we have already announced internally, starting from 2021, we should order EV or hybrid vehicles for all management or benefit cars. We may explore this initiative for Salesforce cars in the later stage, but this is definitely a starting point. And I think as a fleet management, as a fleet manager, we want to implement this strategy in APAC. I think it is important for us to understand the market readiness, as you described earlier. We have the EV industry is well established in China, in Japan, those countries, and also in ASEAN countries. Thailand is also picking up. But the maturity level is vary from country to country. I think in order to implement the strategy to APAC region, and we really need to understand to understand the informations like what are the EV car models available in the local market, what kind of government regulations such as the tax benefit subsidized towards the EV industry, yeah, and also the development of the infrastructure in the countries, like the coverage of the EV charges across the country. Yeah, those facilities and the setup is still vary from country to country, and we need those kind of information. So far, we could not find a central place to share those informations. Yeah, I'm thinking if it is helpful if there's consolidated reports can be provided to the fleet management to have an overview of the market readiness in the APAC country. It will be very helpful for us. Yeah.
Okay, perhaps moving on to the second trend with Huub Smeets of Philip Morris. All multinational companies are putting safety as one of the top priorities on their agenda, employee safety. Also at Philip Morris, we know that you have a very strong safety culture. Can you elaborate a little bit about how you deal with driver safety and employee safety across APAC and what your main recommendation is for other fleet managers, Huub?
Yes, can certainly do. As you say, and rightly say, safety is basically one of the primary concerns of our company, and it's at the heart of us. That is so important. So we have a global standard when it comes to health and safety on vehicles. So there are about like 50 elements which will have to be which have to be equipped on a vehicle. And you can think about ABS, you can think about parking assistance, whatever. Some of them are mandatory, some of them are, you can choose whatever, but it is important. What the challenge is in Asia Pacific is that we have seen in some of the markets that not all of the cars come equipped with our mandatory equipment. And for instance, ABS, which for us is basically standard, is not always standard on a car in Asia Pacific. An airbag, we had issues that cars were equipped with only one airbag. Obviously, that is a no-go for us. So it is mandatory to apply those elements in order to have the most safest environment for the drivers. What we have done is, in order to recognize in some cases that we need to deviate from the standard, there is an exception process. We have an health and safety department who will then review whatever they need to review, because in my example, the ABS, and they will confirm also with the local market if that is acceptable or not. But in general, we have a mandatory health and safety equipment on every single car, being a benefit car or being a working tool car.
Do you also provide driver training, for example, in Asian countries like you do, I know, also in Europe?
That is at this moment still ad hoc. One of the things we want to implement or will implement this year on working tool car vehicles is telematics. So we will learn a lot from that as well. And yes, as a follow-up on that, we could potentially also offer as a standard driving training to drivers who are not conducting the way we would like them to conduct.
Good. Yves, third trend is around mobility.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk to David for this one. David, I can imagine that your management at some point in time would say, okay, well, 1,000 units in 16 countries, why don't we give them some kind of a budget, right? Instead of a car, that might be easier. Now, there's the mobility trend in Europe that is starting to establish itself. There's obviously very good mobility providers in Asia. I'm thinking about Grab, I'm thinking about Gojek, thinking about Ola. Is that something that you have considered in your strategy, and how do you see the evolution moving forward?
Sure. I guess to echo my earlier points around fragmentation, there is a great deal of inconsistency in the idea of mobility in different countries, and I think it's characterized by things like culture, the available alternatives to a bog standard company car, and also safety as well. We have some some countries where a company car is an element of talent attraction and retention. So we would probably expect those countries to continue to actually offer a company vehicle to attract the right caliber of people and to keep those people, particularly in an employee competitive market. But there we have other countries that have very much embraced ride sharing, for example. So you mentioned Grab in Singapore is one. Singapore is one of only a few countries where we've fully endorsed ride sharing as an option for people to get around. I mean, as you know, Singapore has a highly developed public transport system, but there are occasions where you need to get from place to place. You need a vehicle. And Grab offers a very good solution to that. So we don't have a mobility element in our overall strategy as yet. I think that's going to emerge. Our first step in the sequence is really to, as I said, consolidate supply and then see how those suppliers can then offer different mobility solutions as we move forward. You know, in places like my home country, Australia, we have the tyranny of distance. The actual physical distance between a capital and a regional or a rural centre means there's generally only some or very limited options for actually getting a warm body from place A to place B. So, you know, bicycles probably not going to cut it, but vehicles tend to be where we stick. But let's see how it develops. I think we need to see if we can drive some consistency and a move away from the fragmentation that we have.
Okay. A final question, a very short answers, gentlemen, for the sake of time and because we still have some other sessions today and tomorrow in the program. What do you need from your suppliers to make your job more efficient and easier, more comfortable in APAC? And we start with Timothy.
Yeah. Yeah. So of course, thanks for the question. And as a fleet manager, yeah, we are always expecting our suppliers is more proactively, yeah, work with us, yeah, for most of the topics in terms of the communicating with the OEM, dealing with the insurance claim, and supporting our staff, our business users on the field, yeah. So and also providing us a sensible report, yeah, to further define improve our strategy. Yeah.
Okay, good. Huub, Smeets.
I would say regional support, regional contracting, regional account management, all of those elements to push the region into a more regional role.
Good. Very good. And finally, David.
I'd have to echo both Timothy and Huub. The regional approach has got to be very important and needs to develop. And the other thing, to one of my earlier points, really solid information and reporting. Let's be as powerful as we can by knowing as much as we can in real time.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of the Global Fleet Summit APAC.